We've run into some clones here at the GDC show floor, and Josh's going to tell us about a new upcoming MMO called the Repopulation. What kind of MMO is it?
The Repopulation is a sandbox hybrid. We are kind of a sandbox and theme park hybrid, so we kind of mix those elements that you would see in a kind of traditional sandbox, do what you need to do what you want to do, with the theme park elements that you would see in like a traditional WoW or Request, just the traditional theme park model.
So, what's the setting of the game, and what's the fiction here?
So we are a kind of what I call a low-tech sci-fi game. What that means is we actually consist of clones. So our backstory is 100 years ago that they sent out a bunch of cloning DNA data in a ship to another planet, and once it landed on the planet, they actually created these clones out of this DNA. So our big thing is we have two core factions, what we call O1 and FPR. The O1 is really big on only using that cloning data. One world, one nation is what O1 stands for. So they're really all about unity. With the FPR, they're more about basically running themselves, independent, having children. So that's kind of where we get with the high-tech, low-tech differential, because we have with the O1 a little more high-tech because it's a more civilized society. With FPR, they're kind of like living in shacks out in the wilderness because they're more independent that way.
And that takes us to all the buildings and all the sandbox elements. I think you showed off some of it, and it's really, really deep. Sort of what do you want to create with that?
We're kind of looking at, with that aspect, we're looking kind of like a guild structure. So how that overtops is we have what we call nations. It's kind of an umbrella structure for the whole world, kind of like corporations that you would see in EVE. And also underneath that, we have cities, which you can actually plant inside of the different zones. So what will happen is, let's say we're going to beta, alpha, and you're a new player in this world. You can go and there's these control areas that you can drop down control centers and take over as cities. So once you do that, you can actually drop down buildings, props, walls, units, defensive units, offensive units, stuff like that. And once that city, continues to build, you'll actually be able to grow the city as well. You can manage the city, so you have different attributes for the city that allow you to kind of tailor it toward, like, let's say crafters or more offensive people. People want to go out there and kill things. Some people want to create things. So you can kind of go both routes with that. And the big thing about that with the nations, like I said, it's a whole world. So you could have cities all over the different zones and a whole different, kind of map of the whole game. So you could literally have a nation with 5 cities. You can have a nation with, hundreds of cities, depending on how much area they've taken up, in the game.
And that's going to, of course, dynamically change with players, and players can create their own as well?
Yeah, so they can create their own nation. So the first time that they go into the game, they can create a nation. Again, usually it's not one of those things where everyone's going to be running a nation, of course, because there's only a limited amount of land. So we'll be sharded in a sense that way, because if you have eventually you're going to have a nation that's going to conquer a little bit of this area, and it's going to grow in that server. So for players, we still want to give them a little bit of an option to go into like a new world if it opens up, to have an option going in there and growing that out. So players will be able to create nations, but once a server is established, it's probably going to require that they actually kind of join in with a nation or work with an existing nation. The newer servers will probably have a better chance of actually establishing new nations.
But there's a lot to do, even if you're just running a city. It's not like you have to run a nation. There's a lot of rulers in the world.
Yeah, I mean, with a nation, it's going to be very hard to run 100 cities. Let's say you are a nation with 100 cities. You probably don't want to run 100 cities. So what you're going to do is you're going to have people that are actually running those cities that we call mayors. Then you can also have additional people underneath that are called city council, which can do some additional function in those cities. So it's going to be an interesting social experiment, because you're going to have people from a political aspect that, now you got 100 different cities, 100 different people running that. And maybe as a nation, as a ruler, you want to interact with them and kind of be a little more involved, or maybe you just leave them alone, let them run their own cities. So there's that aspect of it. There's kind of the trust aspect of it. So there's a lot of social aspect of that's going to go on. I'm sure there will be some people that will be slightly upset with some things that go on, but it's kind of the same thing with EVE. So you get things with people backstabbing each other. So there'll be a little bit of that as well. So
it's all good fun, right?
It's all, yeah, until someone jumps off a building somewhere. But yeah.
So, when people invest a lot of time building cities, building things, you sort of have to make sure that it can't just get run over like in an hour or two, and sort of that sort of thing. How do you balance with PvP and how the combat of the game plays out?
So yeah, that is a big question we've had. I mean, we've talked to people that have asked us that. We've had people on the forums ask us that, and it's one of those things. We kind of have a general idea and set for that. The big thing that we do is we have defensive units that can control the area. That'll come out like of barracks, and we also have turrets that can be mounted in certain areas, and they can defend the areas. And the big thing is we want to make sure that if you're going to attack something, you have to expend a certain resource besides yourself. I mean, it might be possible to collect 150 people and just rush into a city and take it over. But logistically, that does take a little bit of work. But the big thing we want to do is make sure that if they are doing that, they're going to have to use resources from their nation to do that. So they have to expend resources to go take over. Like in a normal war, if you're going to attack someone, you have to expend real actual people. So we kind of have to look at in that area as well, where we can kind of balance it, where they're actually using real resources versus I go in there, try to kill something, I die, kill something, I die, until I slowly get in there. So we kind of have to balance in that area. That way you don't have people going in 2 or 3 in the morning when your whole nation is sleeping and just take over a city when you're literally asleep.
So it's a free-to-play model. How's the rollout looking? I know it's like you go into beta and then you sort of gradually progress towards.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're actually in the pre-alpha stage. We're going to be releasing the alpha in June, so we'll have a sign-up form. We have quite a few people that are already signed up, and we'll probably take a few more after that. We'll probably go through different rounds, just kind of the traditional alpha beta testing. Once we get to beta testing, we want to do real beta testing, so once we get to beta, we're actually pretty close to being released, so that'll just be more about spinning up servers and stress testing. So we'll go through multiple alpha testing phases until we get all the content finished to a certain degree when it's ready to go. Once it's released, we're looking at kind of the free-to-play model. We're looking at the normal, it'll be freely distributed, looking at subscription options, microtransaction options, no pay to win or anything like that, so that's really big. We've had a lot of questions about that. Absolutely do not want to go that route. But we have to find something that's fair for everybody and make sure that we can stay employed.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.